This week we got Todd Steele. Todd Steele is a local bass guy, good friend of ours. A lot of you guys have probably heard him speak, and a lot of you probably haven't. He'll tell you about anything on walleye fishing. He won't tell you much on bass fishing, but we're fortunate to have him. He lives in Marysville, and he's a great promoter of the area on the fishing. I don't think our area is, it's not even touched on some of our fishing, from bass fishing to walleye fishing to salmon fishing. A Detroit River guy, why is he going to come all the way up here to go walleye fishing when he can do it right there? One of the main reasons is it's not bumper boats. Even when the bite's really on, you got 20 boats there. So, with that said, Todd, thank you very much.
All right, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you for all coming on a Sunday chilly morning to spend a little time with myself. What I'm going to do is I'll start out with how I catch these walleyes, locations. Again, I'm very open on locations, depth, water temperature, and we'll go through the gamut of different ways of catching it from the spring all the way through to the fall. I mean, I'm normally fishing to about just a week before deer season, so this takes place all throughout the year. If you have questions, feel free to raise your hand and we'll answer them at that time. That way we don't get bombarded or you forget different questions as we go along. What I'll do is, again, I'm going to start out in the spring, locations where we catch these walleyes and why, and we'll just proceed from there. So normally on a normal year, a lot of times, I think even last year and the previous years, we've been out at this time. We're dodging icebergs, yes, but coming out of the Malta Black River, you're able to see that ice come and you can be able to scoop back into the mouth. And the way that the river's laid out with the curves or the bends in the river, it comes by the Edison Inn and the ice will go over to the Canadian side and it kind of skips the Malta Black River area. Other than that's a big eddy. It'll suck it back through, come up to the Malta Black River, grab the current, come back. So we'll play dodgeball or however you want to put it, try to stay out of that ice. What we do in the spring like that, the water temperature is obviously very cold with icebergs and et cetera coming in there. I mean, it can be anywhere, let's say 30 degrees roughly in that area, sometimes even colder. What I do, and this is not set in stone, I'm just trying to give you an ideas of how I'm able to take guys out and accomplish and catch walleyes, and I talk with guys at the dock and say, how did you catch these, And that's why I do this with Joel. He's a good friend of mine, and I appreciate the opportunity. I think this is probably the 4th year, maybe 5th, I don't know, that I come in here and do this just to try to help you guys out. There's obviously a wide variety of techniques to catch these walleyes, especially in the spring. Again, as some of you are probably aware, Black River's closed during the winter months for walleyes, and there's a reason for that. They're up there spawning. So my interpretation of what's going on is they're up Black River spawning like they do over the Thames or the Thames we call it, or some of these other rivers. And then what they do is after they spawn, they're filtering back out to the river, so they get out to the mouth of Black River and then they'll hold there at the mouth, and then they'll disperse from there. A lot of the fish that we catch even in the deeper water off the mouth of Black River, in the main part of the river, they're spawning, they're milting, there's eggs coming out of them, etc. So with these new spawning beds that they've put out here, the Michigan DNR, just south of mouth of Black River, they just put a gravel bed in there to help these fish along with the sturgeon for spawning habitat. There's one down by Marysville. I mean, obviously if you look it up, you'll be able to figure out where these are located. I'm kind of myself interested not only just in my bass, but with the walleye or any species of fish, of how this is going to, is it going to really take off? Normally what I've seen in the past down by Lake St. Clair with these spawning grounds, it takes a few years for them to fill in, get some algae growing on the rock, etc., like that, and then we'll see how this works out, but it could be a real good thing for this area. Joel kind of pointed on of a lot of guys head down to Detroit and fish the Detroit River. Obviously it's the mecca You get all them fish that are coming from Lake Erie, they're going up the Detroit River and actually spawning in the river, down in Trenton, etc. Basically, it's the same thing going on up here, it's just an untapped fishery. There was years there, to trust me and a bunch of my friends, and some of them still get angry that I tell people about this, but we're able to go out right here and do just as well, and sometimes even better. There's less pressure on these fish up here. A lot of my Canadian friends come over, and now more and more in the last couple of years, there's quite a few boats out there in these particular spots that I'll talk about. We're starting to figure out how to catch these fish, and actually that they're there. You know, over the years in the past, you've never seen anybody out there other than maybe me and my brother playing around. But since Action Venture opened up that big parking lot, a lot of people are sitting there watching us anyway, so I figured I might as well help out the economy and start doing these seminars and explaining how we catch these fish, okay? So the first spot that we'll talk about is just south of mouth of Black River. Basically from the mouth of Black River down to the Bean Dock, if any of you guys know where that area is, through there. Kind of by the Gray Fox, where they park that Coast Guard cutter. Actually down past, I think, the Gray Fox, roughly in that area is where that first spawning ground is located, where they put in, they had huge barges in there last year, and they dropped in good-sized gravel, but again, I don't know how this is going to affect the fish. Normally it takes a few years for that to fill in with the gobies getting in there and start living, and the gravel and the algae and etc. It usually makes a big, there's a time factor there to catch these fish. I've noticed that towards Lake St. Clair, just because of the smallmouth bass, takes time to filter in there. There's no food, all of a sudden there's just raw rock on the bottom. So anyway, back into the springtime fishing, what I do, and again, this is not set in stone, because of water temperature, and that's very critical, because a lot of guys say, well, Todd, when do we go above the bridge? When do we go down here? When do we go over here? It's all dictated on water temperature. This water temperature is just like my bass or any other species. When it hits a certain degree, they want to start spawning. So these walleyes are no different. Right now, I'm sure there's thousands, if not more, up the Black River spawning right now. But obviously that's closed, so you're not supposed to be up there fishing for them. There's a reason why the DNR has that closed in that book. I'm telling you right now. Or they wouldn't have walleyes being closed up there, which is a good thing. That protects the fishery and gives them opportunity to spawn before us guys really tear into them. But again, back at the mouth of Black River, I normally start right by the mouth. Let's say the first drift, I'll just run up, come idling out Black River, I shut down and I start drifting. There's a couple key things to do, and again, I'm emphasizing the water temperature. I go with a ball-headed jig. You know, your standard ball-headed jig that obviously Joel has a ton of them over there. And there's reasons for that, and I'll kind of go through this real quick. A ball-head jig doesn't fall as fast as one of these slender style of jigs. And we'll get into the reason why when I start jumping into these slender style of jigs and why. But again, this ball-headed jig, I normally go with at least 3/4 ounce because I want to have direct contact with the bottom or with the bait itself. And then the other biggest thing that I do is I go to a paddle style tail. This paddle style tail does a couple things. It slows it down on the fall, and it also has a vibration or a movement of it. And then as you can see on this one, it's colored. I find that on the south of mouth of Black River, if you guys have been fishing out there at all over the years, you'll see the marbled water coming out. Obviously we have crystal clear water coming out of Lake Huron, then you have the dirtier water coming out of Black River, and it's kind of a marble effect. For those fish that are laying on bottom, and they're not really there to feed, but they are hungry from being up Black River, so they're opportunistic, let's call it. If that food is presented to them the right way, they're going to hit it. That's where this paddle tail and jigging very slow. Now we'll get into that, and I'm trying not to jump around too much. But when it's all in the cadence of how you jig. Now cadence is how hard you're jigging this bad boy. I'll see guys out there, they'll pull up next to me and say, Todd, what are you doing? And I can tell right away by looking that the gentleman's over here like this, and he might be pulling this thing up 3-4 feet like this. So that bait's going way up and down. Again, water temperature has these fish metabolism slowed way down. They're just laying, I mean, could you imagine being out there all winter? They're laying on bottom going, oh my gosh, where's this warm water gonna come, you know? So again, when I'm doing it, I barely, let's say the bottom of the water, here I'm in my boat, the floor is the water. I barely pick it up maybe 6-8 inches and then just poof it down. Barely pick it up, poof it down. And when I say pick it up, vision, you know, obviously I got my pole there. This hits bottom. I'm just barely picking it up, maybe a foot, and then poofing down. I'm not poof, poof, poof where it's darting around. I just want to pick it up, poof it down. Normally when you go to pick that up again, it's going to feel like a snag, and you set that hook, and then 9 times out of 10, if it's not a snag, it's going to be a walleye. Again, cadence. I see so many guys doing this wrong. They're out there just jigging like you would be in the middle of July or August, just going crazy with this thing. They can't even catch it, let alone see it. So you just want to be nice and slow. Nice and slow. The other factor that I see guys make mistakes is they don't use a good, reliable, if any, fish finder GPS. Biggest mistake that you can make. Not necessarily, I won't say that it really, it's not as bad at the mouth of Black River, but when you get above that bridge, there's a lot of water out there, and you cannot stay on that school of walleyes. With these particular units, myself, Lowrance is what I use, and you don't have to have a high-tech boat, you know, $70,000, $80,000 boat like I have. You can get out there with these aluminum boats. It's all in positioning. When I'm going along, and a lot of times I'm traveling with or fishing with gentlemen like yourselves, call me up and say, hey Todd, can you know, you have time, can you come out? And I'll actually show them hands-on. But as soon as I catch a fish, I hit a waypoint, because there's reasons for that. That's normally where a school of fish are going to be. Now when I say a school of fish, it could be 2 or it could be 20. I mean, I've seen it where it gets really big in the fall, up above the bridge, where they stack up. It's critical. You don't necessarily have to have these nice touch screens, but Joel has a wide variety of Lowrance GPS products out there. I got buddies that have the little handhelds that they use for deer hunting. They have it, he hangs it on this little lanyard thing around here and he'll hit it. But at least it gives you an idea when you run back up to drift back through where you just caught those fish previous. And you're going to up your game a lot. Again, I just see guys run up there and then they just start drifting through it and run up. There's nothing wrong with that, but if you want to get a little bit better out there, start figuring these fish out a lot easier. There's times when I go out there and I can make a drift or two with a couple guys in the boat and we got our limit. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, that's how many fish are down there if you do it correctly. And I'm trying to give you ideas of how to do this. So on the paddle tails, any questions on that, or? Ask anybody right now. Okay? A lot of times I use scent too. Now there's a lot of scents out in the market. I like this Berkeley Gulp. And what that does is, again, when your cadence is nice and slow, it just gives them a little smell of something that's natural. And by the time they hit it, you got them. Okay? Now what I do with this Gulp, even though this is a spray bottle and you can pick up your lure and spray it aside your boat, a lot of times I take this out and I'll pour it inside the bag, just a little bit. Pour it into the bag of your finesse or the, you know, whatever type of body lure. Let it saturate in there, and it's not going to, a lot of times, affect this. The only time it really affects it, there's some other baits that's called like a 3X and this Z-Man that's really stretchy. It'll kind of melt those baits if you let it soak. But I can pour this stuff into these finesse or a paddle style bait, and it'll last all summer long, you know, in this stuff, as long as, normally I'm going through the baits quite frequently. Other things that you want to look at, especially in the spring, because you get short striking style of fish, is a stinger hook. This one, this rig up here actually is Mick Brome there from Okuma, good friend of mine, local walleye pro. You can see what he has is, and I know some of you guys are in the back, but basically he has a string on there, there's a fishing line, a little connector, and then a small little treble hook. And he keeps his a lot of times just free floating, or he'll barely nose hook it into the body, okay? Now what this is for is when these fish come up and they short strike it, because again, the metabolism of these walleyes are very slow. They're sitting on bottom and it's cold. They've been down there all winter. They've just got done spawning and now they want to catch something. So an easy meal going by, a lot of times when you don't use a stinger hook, you'll feel that weight and pull and you'll miss it. You know, by then you're already down 10, 20 feet or whatever it is because of the current and the wind. So I would definitely highly recommend in the springtime especially is going with a stinger style hook. Now this is one way of doing it, is obviously with the little fish line, it slides up over your hook. Other ways that I've done it is I take, again, this is we're still talking spring here even though the jig head I have. This is a finesse body. Joel keeps a big supply of them. If you look at like a size 2 or 3 treble hook, obviously the way the hole is positioned, there's always one hook that's down. What I do, found that this worked very good, is I slide that over the hook and then I stick it in the body. And after this presentation's done, you guys can come up here and look around at all my different things. But as you can see, that treble hook's positioned on that hook just like that. I have no little keeper on here and everything else because when I hook these fish, you got pressure on them and you can reel them right up. This won't get snagged, I find, as much as something like this that's back on that tail action. The other thing, the reason I like to do this, it still frees that tail up to have movement, especially when you're dealing with a paddle tail. If you put a paddle tail on and then put that stinger hook and it's back by that paddle tail, obviously it's not going to allow that to flap around like it should. You want that free flowing. It gives them a little bit of vibration down there. And you'll see on my paddle tails, which I'm only use a few different colors. Normally it's a natural colored body and then a different colored tip of that paddle tail. Red, chartreuse, I have some here in yellow. The other thing that you can do is spike it. I don't know if Joel carries this stuff, but this is a liquid that you can dip your baits in and it colors them. So you can buy just a natural, let's say I'm out there and my buddy Ron is getting them on red on that tip and I don't have any more. I can actually take that tip, dip it in there and it dries relatively quick and it'll change that red. It's called Spike It. It's been out in the industry for a long time. This one's garlic flavored. So besides coloring your lures, it actually has scent built right in. This one here, again, it's a garlic. Garlic's big with me and the bass end of it. This is chartreuse. So again, if I had a natural style colored bait, let's say like this finesse, I can actually dip that in again and I can color it. I don't care if I dip the whole body in there and pull it out green. If that's what he's catching them on, I'm trying different things. Don't get stuck out there on certain colors just because somebody else is catching them. Now when I start with, excuse me, buddies of mine, 3 of us in the boat, we'll each have a different color. And all of a sudden, Ron's catching them on the hot pink or something like that. That's when we'll start changing up, obviously, and keying on that color. Back on the locations of the walleyes. Again, we're south of Mouth Black River, springtime. It's not rocket science. If some of you guys are local in the area, you can go down there any day and see a lot of boats. A lot of guys will stay out too deep. They'll be out in that 30, 35. Envision that warmer water coming out of Mouth of Black River is hugging that shoreline and going on down towards Marysville. When you get out beyond that, you're in the water temperature of what's coming out of Lake Huron. Besides being crystal clear, which makes it a lot difficult to catch. Because then you get into line diameters, etc. I go by temperature. It's a lot colder in that clearer water than that dirtier water. So a lot of guys say, well, there's no fish in that dirtier water. You're wrong. A lot of times that's where those fish are. When I bass fish down south or up in here, when we're fishing largemouth bass, that warmer water is going to be the dirtier water. It's no different than going out ice fishing with a blue ice fishing suit and your buddy's got a black one. His black one is going to absorb more heat from the sun than that blue one. No different in the water temperature. That dirtier water is going to warm up quicker than the clearer water. But your mindset is well, they're not going to see it. That's where that cadence comes in of barely picking it up and poofing it down. I'm not flicking it. I'm picking it up, kind of let it hold for a second, and then dropping it down. A lot of times that's falling down, that walleye sitting there, he's hitting it. When you go to jig it again, it'll feel like, but all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I got one, you know, and then you'll reel it in. I've done a few TV shows with Extreme Angler in this local area here. I didn't know you were left-handed, man. And there's carpet. If you have a computer, you can go on YouTube and look up Extreme Angler, or actually just put my name in there, Todd Steele, and there's some great videos, TV shows, that I've filmed here in the last couple of years. And you can watch a couple things that I do. And myself and Mick met yesterday, and we talked about different things. When we watch these fishing shows, I'm not necessarily watching the gentleman reeling in the fish. I'm actually watching how he's catching that fish, how he's jigging it, how when he's reeling it, is he giving it a little flick as he's reeling it. Those little things is what's telling me how he's catching the fish, instead of just watching that show of him reeling in this bass, pike, muskie, or whatever, and then having to jump around and okay, you net it. It's all in the cadence, like Kevin Van Dam, how when he's reeling, he gives it a twitch once in a while. It's just automatic in his mind. That little change up in the lure is going to make that fish hit. Okay. Again, on the cadence, I cannot stress it more, especially in the spring, of how you just want to pick it up and then poof, pick it up, poof. I've caught fish down in the south of the mouth of Black River, and I'm talking 10, 15 feet off that wall, where everybody else is way out there. And then Joe sees Sam catch one, so he runs in front of him, and they stay out there, and I just giggle in there tight and just boom, boom, boom. I mean, you'd be very surprised how these walleyes, they want to be out of that current because they've been spawning and they don't have much energy. They're not out in the middle of that river sitting there trying to fight that current like you would think. Yeah, there is some, but a lot of the fish are going to be tight to that shoreline. A lot tighter than what you think. Now and then you might say, well, Todd, can I go down there without a boat and try to just cast offshore? I see a lot of guys, not everybody has the opportunity to have a boat, I understand that. But they're trying to cast twisters and whatnot. You just very rarely are going to catch anything. Just because those fish are tight to the bottom, they don't have the ambition like they do off of downstream Mermaid Park and stuff in July, August as you're casting twisters, Mr. Twister style baits, and just reeling them in. They're not up suspended right along the shore. They're down there deep, laying on bottom, wanting to do one thing and spawn, eat, and get out of Dodge. So, we'll talk a little bit about curly tail grubs. On these curly tail grubs, here's one that's rigged up actually from last year. They're rigged up. Basically, again, we're still talking spring. Got a ball-headed jig. I got a curly tail grub. I always rig it so that curly tail is down like this. The reason for that, so it doesn't come back and hook that hook as much. And that's a glow-in-the-dark body. So as you're out there fishing in that dirtier water, that glow, that will glow green. If these lights are off right now, it's like a neon green. So envision that down by the bottom, all of a sudden they see that. The other thing that I like about it, it has that movement of the tail, just like the vibration of the paddle tail. Now you see how more rigid that is than that paddle tail. This will have a less of a chance to come back and hook that hook like that. And normally I'm able to tell when there's something different on my line, that something's just not right. There's a little bit of weed on there, or that tail's screwed up. So now we'll talk a little bit, we'll jump in a little bit about rod and reel and line selection. What I use, I'm kind of a tall guy, I'm a little 6 foot, 6'1". Myself, personally, I use a 7-foot rod. And the reason for that is twofold. This is an IM8 Okuma, this is an EVX style of rod, very sensitive. I want that, when I set that hook, I want to be able to set that hook because I'm 30 foot down or whatever that depth is, And the other thing, if you guys again go on YouTube, here's a good one for you. When I was fishing with Carl out of Canada for Extreme Angler, you'll watch him, when he pulls and sets that hook, he'll reel down, then he pulls back up, and then he reels back down, and he pulls back up, and then he'll lose that fish. 9 times out of 10, he did this for about an hour before he finally listened to me of how I catch these fish. First of all, when you're jigging that cadence nice and slow, I'm keeping my rod tip down low to that water. I'm not up high, because I got to set that hook, and you got 30 foot of line down, okay? So I'm like this, and when I set that hook and I got him, I just continuously reel in. I'm not like you're tuna fishing or something, and then reel down like that. That little bit of slack will come off. A lot of times they'll come off. Because again, the metabolism of these walleyes aren't to come in and just crush this bad boy like they're so aggressive. They're just coming in and nipping that thing. So a lot of times when I reel these fish in, you're going to have them just by that tip of that stinger. You know, they're not going to be fully engulfing that thing. I wish they would do that. They'll do that as we get into the summer and fall patterns above the bridge. In the winter, again, being so cold, they're very slow when they hit that. You know, they're just sitting there like, oh, what a long winter, and that jig poofs by and boom, you get it. It's just an instinct, kind of a, just triggers them to bite, okay? Other things I've been playing around with, and us in the bass world and the walleyes, you can see there's a new little lures out there that we customize. Basically, this one here is a, I forget who makes this, Storm. This is a Storm shad. Actually, the lead is inside of that. And what we do is we have these little curlicue deals that screw in there. There's a small barrel swivel on there, and there's a spinner. That's doing a couple things. It's giving you a little bit of flash. It puts out a vibration, and that will catch fish. You might look at that and go, what the heck is he talking about? Try that sometime and see what you get. Because and you don't want to go too big on the blade. And again, we're still talking the mouth of Black River, or south of mouth of Black River. There's a lot less current there than there is up above the bridge when you get up in that monster. You can see there's one here like this, and then there's also one that has a long willow style of blade. That's giving off vibration and flash. Those little things like that, you'd be surprised on what they'll catch. It's something to put in your bag of arsenals when I'm out there. If I go out there and start catching them, obviously I'm not changing. But I'll drop that down there and try that. Basically, you can just take any of these style of baits. I can tear that tail off, screw that deal in, and hook on that blade. And that'll turn it into one of these. It doesn't necessarily have to have an internal lead like this one does. It can be this style. I'll just cut it off and put a blade on there. Again, it gives them something a little bit different to look at, excuse me, and also vibration. Okay, so back on the rods, this EVX is also an RTX reel, and when I'm vertical jigging, I like to use a spinning rod and a spinning reel. Some guys are out there, again, go to YouTube and see how Carl did it. When he showed up, he was like, well, I'm using a bait caster, like this style. And we'll get into when I start using this. This is, again, a Kuma. This is an EVX casting rod with the new Komodo reel. Okay, and this is like 7-to-1. So as I'm reeling this one revolution, this is spinning 7 times in there. So I'm bringing back a lot of line. Carl tried to use this, and the reason that that doesn't work as well is with the spinning rod, when I'm jigging, and again, if you look at these videos that are posted on YouTube, you can see I normally have my finger on this bad boy. And when I'm jigging, I'm always constantly feeling. I can sit there and look around and talk and everything else, but just from this, and I've been doing this many years, guys, that I can tell when these fish are going to hit. As it's falling, you'll feel it boom, kind of like perch fishing, or when you go to lift up. If I go to lift up and it feels just anything different, I set that hook. Setting the hook doesn't cost anything. It's when you don't set the hook and you miss that fish, and then you're going to realize I should have set that hook. Any questions on the rod and reel? On the Akuma lineup, there's a wide variety of rods out there. This one's a little bit higher end style. The reel is roughly like $100. and so is the rod here. And they also have a Deadeye series. This Deadeye series is very nice. It has a different eyelet, where this is a ceramic. This is more of a kind of a, I'm not sure what they call it, but let's say it's a metal style of eyelet. Also these different styles of reels, and actually Joel carries a wide variety of these, of the Kuma reels. One thing that I see the guys out there when I'm fishing, they'll drop it down like this and then they engage it by clicking it. You never want to do that. Doesn't matter what type of fishing. You always want to, when you throw that out there, I don't care if you're casting or dropping it straight down, you want to manually flip that over. And the reason for that is if you don't, that'll create a loop in your line every time. You'll get a loop in your line. Then you'll go to cast it again and that loop comes out and then you have a mess. It's just a mess. To eliminate that, when I cast it or drop it straight down, you want to manually close that reel. Try that if you guys using a spinning rod start getting a lot of little loops in there. That's what's contributing to that. You're engaging that reel and that causes that little loop. And yes, there is carpet on it. Of a hole eaten out there by the end of the day. So again, manually close that reel. You do that and you'll find that you won't get as much line twist. Other things you'll notice on any of my rods, I don't use any type of swivels. You know, guys will put these big gaudy swivels on there, which are fine. I mean, if myself personally, no, I'm good. Personally, I never use any type of clips on there. If I was to use a clip, there's some of these clips that Joel carries again here that doesn't have a barrel swivel. It's basically just your small little clip or clasp that can lock it in there. And the reason why I do that, a lot of times, it's a lot easier for me to change colors. Some of the guys too will come up yay far and then they'll put a small barrel swivel here, especially kind of like mix. This one here is tied direct to braid. They'll put a small barrel swivel and then go to fluorocarbon or a mono or some type of line from there. The reason why I don't like doing that is if you reel that puppy up and hit that tip, you'll blow that tip right out. I don't care for that myself. And I don't find that I spin the line up as much by manually closing that reel. If it gets to that point where it's a mess, I put new line on. That's just my personal preference. When you're fishing, again, I got to speed this up or we could sit here all day and talk about this. South of the Black River, I'm normally shallow water, anywhere from, let's say, 15 foot to a max of maybe 30, where a lot of guys will be out by the middle of the river. I mean, I'm up tight. The reason is those walleyes filter out of Black River and then they'll hold, and they're right along that stretch right there. It's going to be a little bit different this year because they tore out a lot of that old barge stuff that was there. And there's going to be more opportunity for these shore anglers to get in there. So kind of have, you know, they have just as much right as the rest of us to be there, you know, and they're launching their big A-sinkers off the wall. It is what it is. We're the ones usually with the boats, so should try to give them a little more. Other things I see guys doing is when they run back up the river, and not to complain here, but let's say you started here and you went down a couple city blocks or whatever, some of the guys run right back up where you're fishing. You're better off going out and around. And the reason for that is if these fish are all sitting in there in a hungry mode, they keep having all these aluminum boats flying over their heads, they disperse. I'm sure Brian Martin here, he's a local diver. But you see how when a boat goes by, sometimes it'll bring them to you, but it'll scatter them, especially above the bridge. There's times with my bass boat, you're cruising like that, I can see the fish parting as I'm coming. They look up and go, oh, it's Todd. But they, you know, so again, they can feel that pressure over top of them, especially when you get this amount of guys. If we each had a boat out there right now in a small, relatively area, they're going to know that we're there. I mean, so try to run out and go up and around. It usually helps things out tremendously, especially above the bridge when we get into that spot, or that part, because the water's so dang clear. You can see bottom out there sometimes in 30 foot. Wide variety of Mr. Twister style of baits. You know, you have your whites, your chartreuses, some of these funky colors that are real bright. I use them all. Again, the biggest thing I can push to you guys is that cadence in the spring. Nice and slow, nice and slow. Guys go, well, Todd, why aren't you using minnows? Why don't you go buy a bunch of minnows? You can, and put minnows on there, but I find that I can catch just as many, if not more, without a minnow. The thing a minnow will do, and we're different up here because of our currents compared to Detroit River. They like to use minnows up there. But that'll actually bulk up that bait. If you stuck a minnow on top of this thing or next to this or with this through the head and had a minnow on there, now you got a bigger bait, bigger profile. It's going to slow down that fall and everything else. And that does work if you want to play with minnows. Myself, I just don't do bait. I can catch them without it by using different scents like your gold, you know, or this type of dyes that actually is garlic scented. I would say 100% of the time when I'm out fishing, I use fluorocarbon line. A lot of guys ask me, well, Todd, it's expensive. You know, the reason for fluorocarbon over monofilament. Monofilament line, you can grab it and it's like doing, doing, doing. It's got a flex to it. Your fluorocarbons and it acts like a braid. And I don't know how many of you all know what braid is. But basically, it's like a woven type of line. There's no stretch. It'll actually cut you. The fluorocarbon's the same way. The nice thing with fluorocarbon too is if I got fish tanks at home, but you lay it in the water, it does a couple different things. It goes pretty much transparent where you can't see it. And if you took monofilament, braid, and fluorocarbon and put it into an aquarium, that fluorocarbon is going to sink. That mono will kind of float, and then the braid will kind of sink as it saturates or the water kind of gets into it. I find that the fluorocarbon doesn't ice up your rod tips as bad as braid. Also, the biggest thing is the stretch. I use fluorocarbon probably, I would say, 100% of the time. It doesn't matter if I'm walleye fishing, bass fishing, or anything. I want that invisibility of it and no stretch. So it doesn't matter if I'm using a bait casting type rod that has 17-pound test or a spinning outfit that's 8 or 10. Now, I'm going to say probably 90% of the time I go with 10-pound test on my spinning rods and reels. I just find that that's been a good diameter that doesn't kink and bind. If you get too thick a line, it's just too thick for the reel and then your guides. And if you get too thin a line, it wants to twist up and you get little knots that you can't get out. So again, myself, I like this trilene fluorocarbon 100%. 10-pound test is what I use pretty much across the board all year long. When you get into braid, there's a wide variety of braid, and I just grabbed this one up here. Just about all the manufacturers make this braid. This is a Power Pro, it's a little slicker. But I find that water kind of will build up on this line, and when you're reeling it in, especially when it's cold like today, it's going to ice up your rods, and it gets real rigid, and I don't do as well with it. So I use fluorocarbon, just to give you some ideas out there. So that's basically mouth of Black River. When you get into colors, I'm real basic, and you can see this is my actual kit. I have one, I call it like banana. It's got a little bit of yellow on there. The hot pinks. I'll use these type of colors in that dirtier water that's marbleized. When we get into the later on in the year, the summer and the fall, that's when I go with all these natural colors. Unless we get some major blowout in Lake Huron and the water coming in is dirty, I try to do a couple things. I try to find that edge of that mud line where the dirty and clean water, normally there's a clean water going right down the channel of the lake, and you have the dirtier water on the Canadian or American side. I try to find that edge. That'll hold them fish. They'll sit in that dirtier water and want to run out and grab it and then get back into that dirtier water. Now again, this is in the summer and the fall. When it's the springtime, you want to be in that dirty water. And this is a good color. This is one that actually was rigged from last year. It's got yellow with a dark profile with a ball head. And that's what you want to use in the springtime. Any questions on the spring?
Yeah, quick question. When you're starting to drift, how often would you change your colors?
It depends on how many guys are in the boat. You know, I normally fish with a couple retired gentlemen, so, you know, he'll have the purple with the chartreuse, and another one will have the hot pink, and I'll have a purple sparkly, you know, something of this nature. You can see even the finesse has these two colored deal. And then normally, as soon as the guy catches one on a certain color, that's when we'll start changing up. And then all of a sudden, if we're all using the same color, then all of a sudden we quit catching them. It's not necessarily color. I'm gonna push more on you guys' location. How far off from that break wall are you? Well, you can sit there and estimate and go, yeah, I think this is about it. To get you to know exactly where you're at. This is where this comes in. This is gonna leave a line exactly of where you drifted. You can zoom that bad boy in. When I run up there with my bass boat, again, you don't need the high tech. I would rather have high tech electronics and trolling motor in a small tub than to have a $70,000 bass boat and no GPS on it. Or a $70,000 Ranger 621 like Mick's got, he spoke to, and have no GPS on there. I mean, that GPS is critical, because now I know that this is right where Ron or Jerry or the guys that I'm with or myself have caught one. I hit a waypoint on there. We run back up 9 times, I would say dang near 10 times out of 10. As soon as I hit, I go, we're getting there, guys, we're getting there, guys. We'll get on that spot, boom, one of us will get another one. Especially when we get into the summer and fall fishing above the bridge. So, any other questions? No.
Spring, south of the Black, Canadian side.
Normally, I don't catch them up there on the Canadian side. And the reason is where's your closest river coming out? That's eliminating or letting out warm water. If anything, you're gonna want to be down by the mouth of Staggett, that small creek right there. That's a bend of the river right there, but that's also very steamy water that comes out of there. Lately, the last couple of years, the discharges along the Canadian waterways there, Esso plant, Dow Chemical, etc., they changed those up. That used to be steaming water coming out of there. They used to be phenomenal. But now they make them have a retention pond up above, and it cools that water before it dumps back into the river. It's made a drastic change on the fishing there. Now, if once we get into the summer and fall type fishing, if you look at that river, you have an inside bend, and I wish I had a map or a board, maybe next year I'll do that, but you have an inside bend and an outside bend. And I tell a lot of guys when they ask me, Todd, how do you catch these bass or whatnot in the river? I'll give you a little insight. Envision the outside of a trout stream. You're standing on a trout stream, and here's the bend of the river. Where's the deeper water? It's going to be on that opposite side of that outside bend, right? On the inside bend, you're standing there on a sandbar. The big river, I envision when I'm out there fishing, that big river like a trout stream. You have an inside bend, outside bend, inside bend, outside bend. Black River, it goes past municipal sewage plant. All that current heads right over to the Esso plant. Well, the Black River's sitting way over in here out